What is good? Welcome back to the Chill Takes podcast. I'm your host Darian, and I have a very special guest, man. Had to dig back into that pick a side bag. Got my man Andrew Velez from the Pick a Side podcast. How are you doing this afternoon, my man?
I'm doing all right, bro. I appreciate you inviting me on to chop it up a little bit. It's been a long
Mhm.
time coming, but here we go. Let's get into it, man.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. I mean, we talked about it already before the podcast began. Like I had Joel on here a few weeks or a month back, and I wanted to get each and every one of you on here. You know what I'm saying? Because, like I said, I'm a big fan of the show, and I like creators that do the same thing as myself. Right? You're a podcaster, content creator, and I know you have a lot of things going outside of this podcast, and a lot of people don't get to know about those things. Right? They just care. They just know all about your takes. Right? They just say,
It's
"Hey,
true.
Drew says this. He's a Broncos fan. He's a Russell Wilson faithful and stuff like that." But
Yep.
there's more to it than that, right? And I want you to talk about, like, you know what I'm saying, your background, right? You went to school. I think what do you have, your master's or your doctorate?
So I got two bachelors. I got one for interdisciplinary science, one that was kind of just like a little stepping stone to get to my next one, which was my degree in nursing.
Okay, so you got a degree in nursing. All right, so you got a degree in nursing and you were doing a podcast at the same time throughout all
Oh
this.
yeah.
But take me back, because Joel told me his story about, like, what he went through, and you got added on later on to the show. So talk to me about your
Yep.
grind. What made you want to get into podcasting with the guys, and and how were you able to do that and also lock into school?
I'll tell you what, I always had a passion for sports. That's always been one thing that's been at the forefront of my life. I grew up playing baseball. That was the main sport that I played. Played basketball as well, but always loved football. Took a love to fantasy football. That really drove my love for the game. Just helped me expand a little bit more. But when it came to podcasting, I wouldn't say I necessarily sought it out. More so, I had this idea with Joel when we were doing the fantasy reaction back in the day before. It's now on the main channel for Pick a Side. We sat, me, Joel, and my buddy G. We sat us three and we did the fantasy reaction show, and that was obviously something a little bit low key, but that was the start. That was us getting in front of a camera. It was during COVID, so we had a little bit more time on our hands. But then one day, I'm just on Twitter. Joel hits me up. He's like, "Yo, bro, do you want to play? Do you want to play Call of Duty?" And while we're playing Call of Duty, we're just chopping it up back and forth about Dak Prescott. That's what I remember us talking about the most. And then he goes randomly texts me out of the blue. He's like, "Yo, Drew, do you want to be on the podcast?" I was like, "Hey, why the hell not?" I went to my
Mhm.
bag. Wasn't trying to embarrass myself. Knew that Pick a Side had a little bit of a following. I believe we were doing draft content. And this was, I want to say, around April. So, because that's where the NFL draft is. But then I got invited on a little bit more. And this is right before I'm about to start nursing school. And the
Mhm.
podcast is going well. And it's kind of interesting timing where if the podcast had hit a little bit later, I don't know if I would have even gone to
Mhm.
nursing school, in all honesty.
Mhm.
But it was kind of at the same time. The podcast is doing very well. We have that video blow up with Ben Simmons, Would You Rather, where that's
Mhm.
like my breakout into the TikTok, because I really wasn't immersed in basketball the way that I am now. With basketball, I've always been a LeBron fan. That's who I've watched. I've really just honed in on whatever team LeBron's on. But once I went onto the podcast, now there's 29 other teams that I have to lock in on. And
Yeah.
I'll be completely transparent. I didn't know about the Jazz. I didn't know about Memphis back in the day, the Timberwolves before they had Anthony Edwards. This
Mhm.
just wasn't my specialty. But once I got on the podcast and they said, "Yo, Drew, you're gonna have to kick it up, or we're gonna have to find somebody else to talk basketball." When I saw the numbers that were translating, I knew that, hey, I'm doing my part. We're doing
Mhm.
well, but at the same time, I'm not trying to sound like an idiot. It took a
Mhm.
lot of me learning the game of basketball, doing my research. But again, this was at a perfect time where this was right before nursing school. So then nursing school starts, and I'm trying my best to keep learning the game of basketball, but also I'm having to study for exams. And so trying to find that balance of I'm studying for exams, I'm also studying for trying to learn basketball, because
Mhm.
football came easy to me, but basketball was a little bit harder at the
Mhm.
time, because again, I really wasn't watching it as much as football. But yeah, that balance of trying to figure out school and the podcast definitely was pretty difficult early on.
Yeah, man, that's pretty crazy that you say that like you weren't too honed in on basketball, and now I like your takes on basketball. I really respect them, man.
Appreciate
Like
it.
you have
Appreciate it.
a good knowledge for the game. Like a lot of us that get into the sports talking like we know about these things since we were kids, but to be an older person and basically adult have to learn all these things on the fly is kind of like definitely difficult. I remember one time on the podcast you spoke about like I think it might have been a Patreon show. Y'all were talking about like how your family feels about like the podcast and what y'all doing, how they believe in y'all now.
For
Talk
sure.
to me about that because you have two bachelors, you know what I'm saying, one in nursing,
Yeah.
right? And I know you focused hard on that, but you, to my knowledge, are pursuing the podcast heavier than school right now. I know
Oh
you talked
yeah.
about taking a break from school. So how was your family okay with that? Taking a risk on a career path that is pretty fluid in comparisons to a degree, which is, still fluid as well, but you have a better chance of making it in life than the
Yep.
podcast.
Tell you what, you asked me that question, it gives me chills because automatically I think about my pops. And of course,
Mm-hmm.
my mom's definitely in support of it, but she's, that's just kind of in a mother's nature, just always wanting the best. What's the safest option? What can my son or my children do that's best going to be in their best interest? My dad, he's obviously been with me every step of the way, like my mother, but in the sense of when it comes to sports, that's been my right hand man. He taught me the game of baseball. Him and I would go to the field together. We would practice hours on end. When it came to sports conversations, he was the one that really put me in a position to have the love that I have for sports in general. And when it came to the podcast, he saw the results and he saw my love, he saw my drive for this. And a lot of what I do now, I credit to him because he gives me and helps me with the confidence that this is something I can do full time. And it's something when you have your parents in your stance just rooting for you, it
Mm-hmm.
just allows you to feel a lot more confident with the things you're doing. And I'm putting nursing to the side for now because I see what we've been able to accomplish in a short amount of time. I see how, people definitely care about what we have to say, whether, we deserve it or not. People
Mm-hmm.
definitely care about our sports opinions. They take a liking to our show, which obviously I never take for granted. I'm definitely blessed in that conversation, but this is something that I love. And
Mm-hmm.
nursing definitely there's a passion for that in its own way, but sports has just always been my personality, just who I am as an individual. And it's something about just doing something you love. And my
Mm-hmm.
parents see that, my dad sees that, and just their support helps drive me to come right here on a camera with you today and just be comfortable enough to have conversations.
Yeah, man, that's a blessing, man. You got a nice support team backing you. You know what I'm saying? Like, even though you have a great backup plan, a lot of people don't have that backup plan, but you're chasing
No
your
doubt.
dreams, and there's nothing wrong with that, man. So, congratulations to you and the rest of the
Appreciate
fellas,
that,
man.
bro.
That's definitely motivating and big time for sure. All right, so let's get into this NFL slate, man. NFL
Let's
Week
go.
13. Let's begin with the Broncos. You're a Broncos fan. You're a Broncos
Yes, sir.
fan.
Yes,
You're a
sir.
Giants fan as well. We won't talk about the
Don't do that.
Giants.
Don't do that. Don't do that. Come
But
on.
you're a Broncos fan. You love Russell Wilson. All right. So Russell Wilson been playing some good football these last few weeks. And of course, unfortunately, against the Texans, he played arguably his worst game of the season, right? Missed some big time plays, tried to make a play at the end of the game, ended up being an interception. I think that Texans defense came alive in that game, right? The young guys stepped up, Derek Stingley, Will Anderson. But talk to me about that game, right? How do you feel about this Broncos team going forward and this Texans team prevailing once again?
It's tough because I look at what our strength has been in the 5-game win streak. It was that defense, turning the ball over, getting pressure. We had done an excellent job coming into this game and going up against CJ Stroud, who we know has been one of the better quarterbacks in the league, and he's doing this as a rookie. But what's been so special about him is that he's limiting turnovers. He's has the best touchdown to interception ratio in all of football. Number one. And number two was my guy, Russell Wilson. And so understanding that, knew this game was going to be a challenge. Was shocked to see Nico Collins go for over 190. That was definitely not in my bingo card. I know he's a great player, but when I have Pat Surtain and Tank Dell goes out, I'm anticipating that we can do a better job of playing defense, especially in our secondary, which has been a strength for us. So for us to get gashed in that way, that definitely was shocking. But in the second half, I think we did a great job. CJ going into the second half almost had 200 yards and finished with just under 300. We were able to get to him, make him feel a little bit of pressure. We're able to get to the quarterback a couple of times. Jaquan McMillan, who's been awesome for us in this 5-game win streak, or in the 5-game win streak, he goes and makes a play on CJ Stroud, makes him fumble the ball. Unfortunately, we're not able to pick it up. I feel like that was the moment that we could have completely turned this game on its head. Our defense did an excellent job in the second half. I have no issues with how we played as a whole. Granted, the first half, we had our lulls, but in the second half, we came alive. Now, offensively, you talk about Russell Wilson having his worst game of the season. I understand where you're coming from, but I'll be honest, I watched that game back again, and I still feel the same way I did the first time. Russ looked the most confident that he's looked in a Broncos uniform. In a big game situation where he hasn't been in many of those as a Denver Bronco, he looked confident. He trusts himself. He was letting the ball go down the middle of the field. That interception by Derek Stingley over the middle of the field, just jumping that route over Sutton, he covered 6.5 yards where Sutton had him beat. And he covered that much ground in that short amount of time, was able to make an amazing interception, make an amazing play on the ball. That decision was good by Russ. He's open. Judy comes in, draws the safety, but Stingley's just able to recover. I think that's an amazing play by Stingley. The one that was tipped at the line, Will Anderson, you mentioned it. His breakout game of the season, gets to Russ 2 times, was making him feel pressure all game long. Tips the ball at the line, they're able to intercept it. That's just, again, great play by the defense. And then that last play that Russ gets intercepted in the end zone, to me, that's a tough play because, again, he's getting pressured. He'd been getting pressured all game long. He brushes off his sack, stays strong in the pocket. I know what he's looking at. That tight end's open. The safety is just hiding a little bit, doesn't see the safety. Safety breaks in on the ball. To me, the issue there is time's limited in that situation. Our only player in the end zone is a tight end.
Yeah.
Why isn't Cortland Sutton, who's been the best red zone wide receiver in National Football League, in the end zone? Why is he running a comeback, or why is he running a hitch route? Russ in that situation is just trying to make a play. Whether you want him to throw it out of bounds in that situation, that's a different conversation. But to me, I love that he trusted himself. He made a lot of big-time plays, especially in that drive to get us into that position. And I understand missing a couple of plays. That the one that people are having a stroke about is the one to Jerry Jeudy, where Jerry Jeudy's by himself. It's just him in the end zone. But at that same time, it's a 4th down. You're trying to keep the drive alive. At the same time where Jeudy gets open is the same time that Russ puts his head down and goes for the first down. It's unfortunate, but of course, all fans see is that he's wide open. It's a touchdown. I'll give Jeudy the benefit of the doubt. People getting on him saying he hasn't been productive. I'm with you. There are situations where he gets open and just the ball's not being thrown to him. But yesterday, where the interceptions definitely were there, it comes to a certain point where I'm not looking at the stats and saying, oh, he got into the end zone twice, but turned the ball over 3 times. I'm also acknowledging that our offensive line was probably the worst that it's been in 6 games. At the same time, the defense on the other side, which had been struggling, came to play against us. And Derek Stingley, since come back from injury, has been one of the better cornerbacks in the game. And Will Anderson has really, really blossomed into the player that Houston had traded up for.
Yeah, for sure. I like that last point, man. I think the Texans defense definitely had one of their best showings of the season against that Broncos squad, man. I'm not necessarily mad at the Broncos offense either. I think it might have been, it's a bit unfortunate that it might have been like a step back after we've seen this offense, really prevail and play some of the best football these last 5 weeks, during his winning streak. But, it's definitely unfortunate. It just kind of ran into a Texans team that's definitely motivated right now just as much as the Broncos. So, the Texans and Broncos currently sit at 6 and the Broncos are 6-6, and I think the Texans
they're now 7-5. Yep.
Okay. All right. So, now the Broncos have the Chargers twice, the Raiders, and I want to say I forgot who else they have, and I know the
New
Texans
England,
have
I believe.
Yeah, and the Texans have a few other more games. So, how does this shake up for either of these teams getting into the final 2 wild card spots, in your opinion?
It seems as if it does not matter the defense that Houston's plays. They're going to ball out. CJ Stroud and the poise that he shows in the pocket, he's so confident in himself to make any throw on the football field. It doesn't matter the defense that they're going to play. CJ's going to be tough. He's going to continue to play high-level football because we were getting pressure on CJ. It didn't phase him. He stood strong. He made consistent throws with Dalton Schultz out, with Tank Dell out, was still able to push the ball downfield to a Nico Collins, to a Brevin Jordan, who has gotten a little bit overshadowed. And I know that there was hype on his name, but of course with Dalton Schultz there, he's going to take a step back, but his number was called. He had himself a solid ball game in his own right. Damian Pierce, another one that has kind of backed up a little bit coming back from injury, but this game versus the Broncos, he definitely let himself be known in this one. I think that you just look at the Texans, it starts with that offense and CJ Stroud and how efficiently they're moving the ball downfield and not giving the ball up either. That really is the main part. But this is still a young team, and for them to be in this position, credit has to be given as is. And I know as a Jaguars fan, you're looking at 3 teams in your division all competing for a playoff spot, and that's not something that I anticipated. The Jaguars definitely were one, but the Colts and the Texans, who I think before the season, a lot of people had both of these teams with their ceiling being 6 wins for them both to have eclipsed that already. And we just finished week 13. I think you just got to respect what's going on over there with the guys over there in Houston. But with the Broncos, it's tough sledding from here on out. We got to win both those games versus the Chargers, which is possible after a barn burner 6-0 game versus the New England Patriots. The Raiders game, you got to respect them just because we haven't won in God knows how many matchups. I think it's 8 at this point in time we've lost in a row. But a win there would have gone a long way. It's going to be tough sledding from here on out, especially now that they have the tiebreaker over us. But again, tip my cap to the Houston Texans. They played a hell of a ball game, and where we lost, and it's upsetting. I think I can hold my head up high, understanding that it was a hell of a game. We just came up a little bit short.
Yeah, I think that the Texans are a good football team. You know what I'm saying? Like I think at the end of the day, like people tried to you know, kind of doubt this team a little bit here and there, but I think after that Jaguars game last week and how they got out of that game and they lost by a field goal in this this Broncos game, I think they're definitely deserving they're earning their respect. And for the Broncos, I think they'll be fine, man. They can't lose out anymore. But Sean Payton this year has been definitely breaking out some bad records. He beat the Chiefs this year for the first time in like a long time, and I think
God
he'll get
bless.
the Raiders this year as well. So, you mentioned the Colts though, and let's transition right into them because they are currently, surprisingly enough, the hottest team in the AFC according to the win streak. They're on a 5-game, either 4-game or 5-game winning streak right now. They currently sit in the last wild card spot in the AFC. What do you make of that? Shane Steichen has done an amazing job with the quarterback shuffling. Gardner Minshew steps in. Their defense is still balling out. Michael Pittman had an amazing performance yesterday. Alex Pierce did as well. What can you make out of this Colts team, which is pretty crazy because they are 7-3 against every team in NFL they face outside of the Jaguars. So, how do you feel about this Colts team right now?
Shane Steichen is an offensive genius. I mean, for him to do this with a backup quarterback and Gardner Minshew, who's not bad. He's not a bad player by any means, but he's a backup. And there's nothing wrong with that in the NFL, especially when Gardner Minshew is probably at the top of that list in terms of backup quarterbacks. When he has a favorable matchup, you can trust that Gardner Minshew is going to go out there and do a job. You mentioned Pittman and the dominance that he's shown, the consistency that he's shown. When I do my fantasy football podcast with Joel, I feel like I have to give nothing but praise to Pittman since week 6. This guy's just a double-digit machine, and going up against Tennessee, I had this inclination that he would have himself a ball game with the idea that Tennessee secondary is not that good, but Shane Steichen and the plays that he's able to develop and put forth, and you have no Jonathan Taylor in and out back out of the lineup, but Zach Moss is still able to do a job. Wasn't the most efficient versus Tennessee, whose run defense has been known to be great, but this season has kind of slowed down a little bit. Did a great job yesterday, but Minshew really, it starts with him. He was able to consistently push the ball downfield. You mentioned Alec Pierce, him have himself his breakout game of the season. But it's just a great team effort and starts with Shane Steichen and what he's able to draw up for that offense over there. The defense of the Indianapolis Colts hasn't been the best, but they do have some players. They are able to get some pressure on the quarterback. But really, what has impressed me the most has been this offense where they're a top 10 offense and they're doing this with a backup quarterback.
Yeah, and it's definitely, if they can sneak into the playoffs this year, that would be big time, right? But it bodes well for their future, right? Because like you said, Shane Steichen, excellent, offensive minded head coach. You have AR coming back next year. Hopefully he can stay healthy. The sky's the limit for this team. The sky's the limit for this division because you're going to have the Jaguars, Texans, and Colts And, the Titans are going to be there. Mike Vrabel's a respectable head coach. He'll get this team back running again eventually. But we can look at this division in a few years or so being the best division of football after being, in years past, the worst. So
One
that's
of the worst,
pretty interesting to
definitely.
see. Yeah. So sticking with the AFC, though, let's bring up your favorite team, the Kansas City Chiefs.
Oh, great.
uh,
So excited.
they lost last night. And, these really this entire season so far, in my opinion. Yeah, point to the sky for sure. Because, man, we I said coming into this year, man, this team it was going to be a little detour in the dynasty run this year. I said in the offseason they didn't do enough, in my opinion, to add offensive weapons. So far this season, we are seeing that transpire, right? Brett Veach, who a lot of fans out there have been harping, pretty bad about lately because of the, ineffectiveness of trying to add weapons to this offense for Patrick Mahomes or legitimate ones. And week by week, especially at the trade deadline, this offense has been not good, in my opinion. Last night,
Nope.
they another rep sledding. I feel as if Andy Reid tried to approach the game in a different way by giving Isaiah Pacheco the ball 18 times. Yeah, arguably his best game of the year.
Sure.
Travis Kelce did his thing. Rashee Rice had a nice night, but Patrick Mahomes had nobody to throw the ball to outside of Travis and Rashee Rice. And defensively, it might have been their worst performance of the year as well. I mean, they made some key stops, but when the offense got back on the field, they could not get anything of it. So, what do you make of this Chiefs team right now?
They are missing Tyreek Hill. And I understand that last year they won a Super Bowl. And you can't say anything about that because they had a similar group of guys, but you had a Juju Smith-Schuster. He
Mm-hmm.
definitely was a solid impact player for them. Where he's not a great wide receiver, but he's an above average wide receiver that fulfills a role for them. I feel like we're seeing Rashee Rice now be put in a similar position that a Juju Smith-Schuster was in last year, but there's no reliable guy on the outside that can win on a consistent basis. I like Rashee Rice. He is a rookie. You have to temper expectations with him.
Mm-hmm.
How can you put so much on his shoulders when he is young? And we haven't seen in years past a rookie wide receiver thrive in an Andy Reid situation outside of Deshaun Jackson, who's just celebrating retirement right now, who has a
Mm-hmm.
chance to be a Hall of Famer, but is just one of the better players that we've seen or one of the faster wide receivers that we've seen. But
Mhm,
there's no receiver that you can trust on a consistent basis. Kadarius Toney in and out of the lineups. MVS has cost the Kansas City Chiefs some games this year. Sky Moore is just not a good wide receiver at this point in time. And now they mentioned Veach and his lack there of getting Patrick Mahomes help there. He's tried through the draft. McCole Hardman, Sky Moore, Rashee Rice seems to be the only guy that has ended up paying dividends. But in the first round, they go and they drafted Clyde Edwards-Helaire out of LSU, who had himself an amazing year then. But in hindsight, now we're looking at that as a huge mistake when Jonathan Taylor could now be on the Kansas City Chiefs. So there's
mhm.
definitely some mistakes that were made when it came to addressing skill position players on the offense. But the defense, which has been the bread and butter all season long, one of the more reliable defenses, Jordan Love just went in there and did an excellent job of executing against them. And that's also credit to Matt LaFleur and what he was able to do out there too. But I mean, when Love was hitting essentially any throw that he wanted to, confidence that he was showing in the pocket, the Chiefs defense definitely did struggle, but you got to give credit to the other side. I think this Chiefs offense has seen better days, and without a true wide receiver one, this can't be a team that I feel confident that can make it out of the AFC.
Yeah, I agree. I think they're as of right now a one and done team in the AFC playoffs because as if the season were to end today, Patrick Mahomes will be the fourth seed and he'll be having to make a first career road start in the playoffs, which he's never done before, right? Um, of course, you can't underestimate the heart of a champion, but I just don't see this offense putting up points in key moments in games. Like imagine this deep. I mean, we haven't seen it face off this year, of course, because of scheduling. But imagine this team going up against the Baltimore Ravens and their stacked defense. Right. I
Yep.
mean, Patrick Mahomes might get boxed in. You know what I'm saying? He's a phenomenal quarterback, the best in the football. But I don't know how Andy Reid can scheme around what Mike McDonald loves to run out there, right? Can they keep up with the Dolphins? We've seen it before in Germany, right? It was, neutral
Yep.
site field. But what if this game is in Miami, right?
Talk to him.
When they reface. So, even the Jaguars to a certain degree, I don't think the Jaguars match up well against them. I'm being honest and objective because Andy Reid
Yep.
definitely has Doug Peterson's number. But still, if it's in Duval County, who knows what could happen? So, this Chiefs team is definitely kind of reminds me in comparison to the team behind me, the Golden State Warriors. After their year with the championship, they won in 2022 against the Boston Celtics that following year. they had a lot of change. They got a little cheap on the front office and not trying to put in some actual veteran presence to help out that the offense and what they did. And it's seen that this year with the Chiefs, man. They just don't have enough offensively, even though they made pieces, young pieces, but they should have went out there and got DeAndre Hopkins. They should have tried to trade for Mike Evans. They should have tried to trade for a receiver at the deadline at some point because they're definitely suffering and they definitely miss the presence of Tyreek Hill, which any offense would if you lose them, but you're definitely seeing that big time this year.
I'm with you.
Yeah, man. So we'll get into the Packers later on the show because I want to talk about a few of the NFC teams first because I'm excited about this Packers team and how they can end the season. But Dak Prescott's been a topic of conversation these last few weeks, rightfully so. Right? He's been
Deservedly
playing,
so.
man,
Mhm.
amazing football. And just recently, before this podcast began, I saw the new MVP odds. And man, in my opinion, the NFL is very shameless, man. It seems like every week one performance just boosts a potential candidate through the roof. Brock Purdy now has the odds on favor. Now it's Vegas. We're not going to pay too much against to that, but Dak Prescott has arguably been the best quarterback in football these last 8 or 7 weeks. Right? Where do you rank Dak Prescott amongst quarterbacks right now?
Right now, you have to have the conversation. We're just talking ranking the 2023 season. Dak Prescott has been a top 5 quarterback in the National Football League. He has been that great, has been taking care of the football ever since that game versus San Francisco, where they got their ass beat. But sometimes you need your ass beat to get yourself in check. And that's
Mhm.
exactly what we've seen out of the Dallas Cowboys. Now, we can be transparent. Along that ride, they have not faced a great slate of teams outside of this game versus Philadelphia, where unfortunately they did come up a little bit short. But in every single matchup, we've seen Dak Prescott rise to that occasion. Even in that Philadelphia game, he had a situation where his tight end was just short of the goal line by maybe a half inch. What can you do about that? And then in that last drive of the game where he should have gotten a flag for unnecessary roughness, illegal hit to the head, no flag there, and then
Mhm.
throws a ball to CeeDee Lamb where I think that you probably should have thrown it on the end zone line, at least give him a chance to score. You come up a little bit short there, but he has been putting up some insane stat lines. He's been executing at a very high level. And you look at this game versus Seattle where they went punch for punch. Dak had the last laugh and was able to come away with the W there. I think that he's been playing excellent football just all around. McCarthy has done a great job to put Dak in a position to succeed, but on top of it, you got to go out there and execute. He's trusting his guy, CeeDee Lamb. We're seeing Jake Ferguson get involved in the offense a little bit more. Brandon Cooks looks very comfortable in this offense as well now that we've seen the Cowboys go on this little heater of theirs. Got to respect what's going on with Dak Prescott. Do I think that he's the MVP of the league? I think that it's a 3-man race. I still
Mhm.
think you have to respect Jalen Hurts even after a loss last night to San Francisco. Dak Prescott has to be there. And I would be remiss if I didn't mention my guy Tua Tagovailoa, who goes out there and puts a perfect passer rating up against Washington, is right now the highest graded quarterback according to PFF. And he could have put up an even more insane stat line versus Washington, but they went into cruise control. I thought that they were going to stat pad a little bit. Maybe that's a
Mhm.
little bit more of Dak alley.
Mhm.
Let me not joke too much there, but Tua Tagovailoa goes out there, executes near perfect in that first half. They go into cruise control, win that game. But Tua has been right there every step of the way, has a very similar case to Dak Prescott to winning MVP. I just think that it's going to come down to this last stretch of games where Miami has Dallas, has Buffalo, has Baltimore. That's the big knock on Tua and the Miami Dolphins, that they can't beat one of the upper echelon teams. Well, let's just be transparent. We haven't
Mhm.
seen that with the Dallas Cowboys either. So I think that it's really going to come down to these last weeks. And this is one of the better MVP races that we've seen in some time.
Yeah, it definitely is. And let's talk about the MVP race since we're talking about it right now, because it's definitely, I mean, it's still a tooth and nail in my opinion, man. It's very
Oh, yeah.
hard to justify anybody that rightfully deserves it right now, right? I mean, you can't even count Patrick Mahomes out, even though he had a bad performance against his Packers team, but he's the reigning MVP. And in my
That's
opinion,
true.
kind of like in boxing, to beat the champ, you must knock him out, right? Someone has to
Fair.
like have a godly performance in these last few weeks to rightfully say he deserves the MVP over such and such. So you gave me your top three, and I agree with it. I have Dak, Jalen, and Tua in that conversation. Okay, so how about the other three that people are mentioning? Lamar Jackson, Brock Purdy, and of course, the outlier, a skill position player, Tyreek Hill.
Now, Tyreek Hill has probably been the most dominant player in football. Just no matter what, you cannot stop him. He's on
Mhm.
pace for the greatest wide receiver season that we've seen. And that's also coming off of a season where we saw Cooper Kupp go for the Triple Crown, cap it off with a Super Bowl MVP, an amazing run for Tyreek Hill to be doing what he's doing. And also, remember when the conversation was that he was going to come to Miami and he wasn't going to be able to reach that height that he was with a Patrick Mahomes. But here he
Mhm.
now is with Tua Tagovailoa, a inferior quarterback. And of course, I respect Mahomes. He is better than Tua, no doubt about it. But they treated Tua like he was trash. I think
Mhm.
that you can't succeed the way that Tyreek Hill has without a quarterback, especially one that's playing at the level of a Tua Tagovailoa. I understand all the attention that he draws and allows other players to scheme open. You look what a chain has been able to do in his limited time. Raheem Mostert, Jalen Waddle has been having moments here and there where we know Jalen Waddle has that ability, but again, he's kind of been lacking behind a little bit for what expectations are for him. But again, what he does for this offense, I can understand him being in this conversation. But to me, if Tua is not on that field, we saw last year without him, this isn't a real team. This isn't a team
Mhm.
that's competing for what they are competing for right now, which ultimately is a Super Bowl. Without the quarterback, I feel as if this conversation becomes null and void. And that's not to take anything away from Tyreek, because what he's doing is historic. But to me, I have to give acknowledgement to Tua there, because again, he's the one also scheming up, where you saw yesterday he sees something at the line, understands that Tyreek has an advantage, calls the audible, gets him open, throws a perfect ball to Tyreek. So to me, I feel like it becomes more, it is a quarterback award, and it's unfair because I
Mhm.
think that skill position players obviously impact the game a lot. But it is unfortunately a quarterback award because they're just the most valuable player.
Mhm. Yeah, for sure. What about Lamar Jackson?
Lamar Jackson also has a great case because think about how impossible it is to defend against him. I mean, we're seeing him progress as an amazing passer. I think his completion percentage is what, 70%, around 70%,
Yeah.
a career
Mhm.
high for Lamar Jackson. Of course, you understand the rushing threat that is. I just think the passing stats are lagging a little bit behind, which is why I would favor a Jalen Hurts over him in that situation, where we're seeing Jalen have the passing numbers. Of course, has the rushing touchdowns as well, has the winning record. I just think that if you're going to compare the two of them, where I would just have Jalen Hurts over him a little bit more just because of the passing numbers and turning
Mhm.
the ball over, Jalen has more INTs, but when it comes to fumbling, I mean, they're essentially the same guy. They both really do struggle with holding on to the ball, but they have so much responsibility on their shoulders. Lamar deserves to be in this conversation, but to me, I just think he's a tier underneath these guys just for the counting stats of it all.
Mhm. And what about for the acclaimed MVP leader right now, according to the Vegas
Mr. Brock
odds,
Purdy.
Brock Purdy? How you feel
Let me
about
tell
that?
you, I respect the hell out of Brock Purdy. My mom's a
Mhm.
Niners fan, so I'll give her that little shout out right there. She loves Brock Purdy, Mr. Irrelevant. Not so irrelevant anymore when it comes to all the advanced statistics. Brock Purdy, number one down the line. You have to respect and acknowledge what he's doing. To me, would I put him as the most valuable player? I wouldn't go that far. I'll say he's been one of the better quarterbacks this season. That's not trying to knock what he's been able to do. But you look at last night's, where it allowed sports books to feel confident enough to put him at number one. It was a lot of yards after the catch. And again,
Lot
that's
of
not a
yak for
knock.
sure.
You have to
Mhm.
go out there and execute. But
Mhm.
Debo Samuel was the most valuable player on the field yesterday. Debo
Mhm.
Samuel and his yards after the catch, his breaking tackles, getting into the end zone, he was the most valuable player to me. And then you forget that Christian McCaffrey is Christian McCaffrey, and he's impacting the game not just as a rusher over 5 yards of carry, but we see what he can do in the air as well. There's just so much talent on this team. You gotta credit Shanahan as well. I mean, he's just an offensive genius. Would I say he's the MVP? No. Would I say that he has been playing at a very high level and should be considered one of the better quarterbacks in the National Football League this year?
Mhm.
Without a doubt, the numbers don't lie, and he keeps on winning tough ball games. That Niners game, in my opinion, the most meaningful win of the 2023 season. You have that win over Dallas, and then you had people doubting Dallas and their abilities. They go on a little bit of a skid without Debo and Trent Williams. And now
Mhm.
they're coming back. They go into Lincoln Field and they lay an ass beating to the best team in football. I mean, you have to respect and acknowledge what's going on over there in San Francisco. On all fronts, they're a dominant team.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think Brock Purdy definitely deserves to be in the conversation. I just wouldn't have him number one. I think I look at it as if like an NBA team that's kind of stacked, right? You have Kevin Durant, Steph Curry, Klay Thompson, Draymond Green, and Iguodala, right? It's hard to
Oh
give
yeah.
KD or Steph Curry the MVP when there's so many more moving pieces around them, right? I mean, Christian McCaffrey, Debo Samuel, Brandon Ayuk,
Mm.
George Kittle. I mean, there's just so much talent on this offense. It's kind of hard for me to sit up here and say that Brock Purdy is the most valuable player on that field. Now he's been spectacular, and it's a quarterback's award, and he is the driving force of his offense. But at the end of the day, man, there's so much help around him that it's kind of hard to give him that award. But if you had to give me your MVP pick as of right now, who would you say?
It's tough because you come off that loss against San Francisco. Prior to this week, I would have had it as Jalen Hurts because that team goes as far as Jalen Hurts can take them. We saw that with the Buffalo Bills, where you had a moment where Josh Allen, for a majority of the game, if you just take the game as a whole, he was better than Jalen Hurts. But
Hmm.
when Jalen Hurts turns it on, there is no one that impacts winning right now more than he does outside of Patrick Mahomes. And so, to me, it's really between the three guys that I mentioned. If I had to say, I'm going to put my faith into a Tagovailoa to
Okay.
get it done down the stretch. It has to be a position where he wins two of those three games versus Dallas, versus the Bills, and versus the Ravens. More importantly, that game versus Dallas, because Dak Prescott definitely is gaining some steam to win that MVP award. And if Tua can go and come away with the W, when we're seeing that defense finally come into form and the offense finally clicks at the exact same time, I think Tua
Hmm.
can put together a stretch with the numbers that he has already that he can win the award, and that would be my MVP.
I like that. I would lean more towards Dak right now. I think he was the best quarterback in
Fair enough.
November this season. He has been answering the call every single time they matched up. Now, for him, his only knock would be, well, they didn't face anybody, right? That's fine.
Yep.
Okay, cool. He ends the season with the Miami Dolphins, the Buffalo Bills, and I want to say they face someone else too. That's pretty tough. Oh
Philadelphia
yeah, the
Eagles
Eagles.
next week.
Eagles. Yeah.
Yeah.
So he has three more games out of these next five to really, what I'm saying, solidify this award and really capture it. Because if he beats the Eagles at home, right? And if he grabs his one seed somehow, some way, I don't see how you cannot give him the
I'm with you.
MVP with the Bills and Dolphins up next, right? So, but let's talk about the NFC seeding real quick because, of course, the Niners just blew out the number one seed, the Philadelphia Eagles. The Niners are now 9-3, where the Eagles are now 10-2. So it's a three-team race, in my opinion, in the NFC. You have the Niners, Eagles, and Dallas Cowboys. How confident are you right now in the Niners possibly recapturing the one seed and having that first bye in the playoffs?
Say confident. I'm not 100% sure on that yet. I understand that Dallas and Philadelphia do meet up this upcoming week. And with the way that Dallas has been playing and the way that they played Philadelphia the last time they met up, it's definitely in the realm of possibility that we see Dallas come away with that one and bring the Eagles to the same record as the San Francisco 49ers. So, confidence level, that's tough, especially because you can't count out Philadelphia, and you understand that
Mhm.
even still with the defense lagging behind that offense is still able to put up points essentially against anyone. Apparently not San Francisco, but regardless, I'm gonna go. It's really a 50-50 coin toss. It really is dependent on this game versus Dallas and where it stands right now. I can understand if people want to lean Dallas, but I think Philadelphia understand what's at stake here, the number one seed and getting home field advantage. It's very crucial to what Philadelphia wants to do down the stretch of the season. So I look at San Francisco, and to me, they're the only team that is well rounded, just does not have a hole really at any level, or
Mhm.
I'll say is just the most well-rounded team offensively,
Mhm.
defensively. You look at the Eagles, the defense is lagging behind. You look at the Dallas Cowboys, where their defense has been pretty great against Seattle. They got exposed. Their rush defense is not one that I'm still trustworthy of. And Deron Bland, if he's going to go up against an elite wide receiver, he's had himself a historic year. But at the same time, I don't know if I can trust him with a guy like an AJ Brown or like we just saw versus Seattle, a DK Metcalf. So it's tough when you look at those three teams and just the main takeaway can't be, or that it's hard to not take away that the Niners are just the most all around team, and that's just the truth right now.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's going to be very hard for Philly to lose this one seed, man. They'll have to go into just a huge losing streak, which would be really crazy to see. But I just don't see it. I just don't see it as of right now, man. That Cowboys game would tell us a lot more about this team. But sticking with Philly right now, you know, what is your opinion on this team going forward after that embarrassing loss? Right. Of course, you never want to lose like that in the NFL, but losses do happen. They just brought in Shaquille Leonard to be their, driving force in that linebacker room, what they desperately need. And I think that really helps out their, their mindset defensively, because I think they're really soft defensively this year. Offensively, there's been some struggles here and there, but defense needs to be talked about a lot more. How do you feel about this Eagles team going forward after that Niners loss?
Watching that game back, Cunningham was getting absolutely torched. It did not
Yeah.
matter who was on him, whether it was
Hmm.
McCaffrey, whether it was George Kittle. They were really just toying with him, doing whatever they wanted, whoever offense type deal. So you bring in a Shaq who may not be that same player that he once was in Indianapolis, but again, you mentioned a mindset. He's going to come in there and he's going to try and bring the dogs out of these guys. That's his job as the linebacker. You're the captain of the defense. He's going to bring the most out of these guys. And I think that they do need to lock in on that side, because that's the reason why San Francisco can come into Lincoln Field and put the beating on like they did. The same way that we saw the Niners do to Dallas. The Niners are just capable of scoring points on any team. But when we're talking about Philly in particular, the defense has been the biggest question mark of all phases. And for them to get Shaq, I think it's definitely going to give them a boost. Very interested to see just the intensity that he plays with, because you understand when you go from a situation that isn't the most ideal, although credit to the Colts, they've been playing some better football than anticipated. But again, we've seen Shaq deal with some injuries. Hopefully that he's ready to go if you're a Philadelphia fan. I think it just starts with intensity and just locking in on that defensive side of the ball. Last year, they were one of the best defenses. We had our question marks about the secondary that kind of got exposed in the Super Bowl with Patrick Mahomes. But then all this year, it's just been whoever they've been going up against. They've been able to get scored on. We saw Sam Howell go for over 300 yards 2 times against them. We saw Dak Prescott have himself a great ball game. We saw Mac Jones go for over 300 yards. This defense really is just not good. But hopefully
Yeah.
with Shaq, it's a little bit more intensity.
Yeah, I agree, man. It's just the mindset. I'm watching, Reed Blankenship just miss on, open field tackles. Like Zach
Yep.
Cunningham the same way, man. It's just all about the mindset. They got to get tougher, and hopefully, like we mentioned already, Shaq can kind of bring that out those guys, during
Oh,
this
yeah.
potential championship run. Going to the playoffs real quick. Sticking with the NFC before we move to the AFC. Um, how do you feel about the Packers? We talked about them previously in the podcast a little while ago, but are they a dark horse in the NFC and potentially getting there and also spoiling a team's dreams this year?
So I'm looking at the playoff picture right now. There's two teams that I really like that are fighting for that spot. It's the Green Bay Packers and it's the Los Angeles Rams. Now, when it
Mhm.
comes to the Rams, I I just always have a soft spot for them because my first year on the show, that's the team that I had winning the Super Bowl week 1. They went and they go on, they win the whole thing. Matthew Stafford vindicates me. Cooper Kupp has one of the best seasons that we've ever seen from a wide receiver, in my opinion, number one. But when it comes to Green Bay, this is the youngest offense in football. And they've been slowly but surely these last few weeks figuring it out. You have Jaden Reed, you have Dontavian Wicks, Christian Watson, who leaves that game late last night with the hamstring injury. And it's unfortunate because the last 2 weeks we saw Christian Watson really unlock. And now we saw that offense really start to move down the field with some efficiency. So you gotta respect and acknowledge what's going on over there in Green Bay. Jordan Love deserves praise. I've tried to stay as consistent as possible with Jordan early on in the season. He was not that good, but as the season's gone on and he's gotten a lot more comfortable in LaFleur's system, he looks very confident and has been executing at a very high level. To go out there and beat the Kansas City Chiefs is not easy. And
Mhm.
remember the last time that Jordan Love faced up against Kansas City, it was his first start as a Packer and he got embarrassed. And
Yeah.
ironically, that was the same game that we saw the Chiefs defense kind of do a 180, and that was when they went on their Super Bowl run. So
Mhm.
you look at how much he's progressed in such a short amount of time this season. You got to love what's going on over there in Green Bay. That defense plays hard. Rashawn Gary has been awesome in his limited opportunity, and I say limited opportunity because he should be playing a lot more than what he does, but they try to
Yeah.
take it easy on him, and he's just dominant when he's on the field. And they're doing this without Jair, and Eric Stokes has been going through some injuries also. So you got to give a lot of credit to this team. They're a resilient group, and doing this 1 year after losing your best quarterback in your franchise's history in Aaron
Mhm.
Rodgers, I mean,
Yeah.
it really is a testament to what's going on over there in Green Bay.
Yeah, man. Shout out to Matt LaFleur, man. People are starting to question him as a coach a little bit, but the response we've seen these last 4 weeks has been amazing. And they have some games coming up, but the way their schedule shakes out, they have the Vikings, Panthers, Buccaneers, Giants. I mean, Matt LaFleur was 16-0 in the month of December. it might increase to like 20-0 when the season's over, man, because I don't see them
For
losing the
sure.
game. I mean, I think that Vikings game is in Minnesota, if I'm not mistaken, maybe.
Hmm.
But that's it, like their only toughest bout after that. So, I mean, I'm excited to see this Packers team how they turn out because Jordan Love is turned into something very special, and unfortunately, for teams out there that haven't been able to hold the value of a franchise quarterback, the Packers once again looked as if they're getting another franchise quarterback in like back to back.
You
You
don't
know what I'm
miss.
saying? They
You
don't
don't
miss,
miss.
man. So yeah, it's really good for them. Switching to the AFC real quick. It's really a 4-team race for that one seed. Right? You have the
It is.
Dolphins, Ravens, Jaguars, and Chiefs. How do you see that shaking out? Who's grabbing the one seed?
It, it's really tough because you look at Jacksonville and the Dolphins. If they win out, they hold their own destiny. But you look at that Miami schedule down the end of the season, it's probably the toughest of the three, with Dallas, with Baltimore, and with Buffalo to end the season. Again, like I mentioned, there's going to be narratives involved, and these are the three biggest games of the season for them because, again, the past is the past. You move on. But when the defense is playing at the level that we've seen it since that game that Jalen Ramsey came back, the defense has been playing at a different level. And even with the loss of a Jalen Phillips, they're still able to get to the quarterback. You saw Van Ginkel go out there and have himself a pick six, the replacement for Jalen Phillips. I mean, this defense has done a full 180, and it really has been great to see because it complements the offense very well. One of the best offenses in football. Again, I feel like I'm going to put faith first. I think that the Miami Dolphins are going to be the team that ends up with that one seed, with Dallas, with Baltimore, with Buffalo. It's really those two games versus the Ravens and Buffalo, where, of course, it is conference, and that's going to matter a lot for tie-breaking situations. Getting that win over the Ravens would be huge. I think that trust in both phases, I lean with the Dolphins. Offensively, they're one of the best teams in football. They're right now number one statistical offense in football. And then with the way that they've been playing since Jalen Ramsey's coming back on
Mhm.
defense, I think that that's my team right now to be number one.
I'm not mad at that. I'm not mad at that whatsoever. I would love to see my Jacksonville Jaguars, but speaking objectively, man, I want to grab that one seed so bad. But we have the Bengals tonight, the Browns the following week, and the Ravens at home again
Oh, yeah.
after that, man. And after that, it's smooth sailing. We do have the Buccaneers, the Panthers, the Titans, and I think that's it to close out the season.
Yep. Hmm.
But that Ravens game worries me for sure. I mean, these next three
Understandable.
games really worry me because these are respectable teams. The Browns have arguably a top 5, top 3 defense in football, regardless who's playing quarterback. And the Ravens team is arguably the best team in the AFC. So, you know, is there any chance the Jaguars can do it, in your opinion?
I'm going to say, yeah, the schedule is pretty light. And with the way that the offense has looked these last 2 weeks with Zay Jones back in the lineup, which is it's so shocking. Let me
It
not
is.
say shocking,
No, it
but
is
but
shocking.
it's
It's shocking.
really it's funny because Zay Jones you wouldn't think is that much of an impact player, but you don't know how much his presence impacts the number one talented guy on your receiving core, Calvin Ridley, because now it allows his route tree to open up and he's not just running go balls. And Christian Kirk, who he's one of my favorite guys on your guys' team, just super consistent, super reliable. So when you have Kirk, who already has been the consistent guy that is, now you have Zay Jones opening up the field for Calvin Ridley, ironically, when it should be the other way around. I mean, Trevor Lawrence looks to be the most comfortable, the most confident so far this season. And I think that the numbers have been rude to Trevor Lawrence's story on the
Mhm.
season. I think he's playing a lot better than what the numbers say. You guys have dealt with a lot of drops. You're right. The offensive line has not been that good. But again, like I mentioned, Zay Jones in and out of the lineup. But now we're starting to see Jacksonville get comfortable. My concern with you guys is on the defensive side of the ball, which people have been trying to say this is one of the main reasons why Jacksonville's been so great. To me, I still have my concerns about that secondary. Your rush defense has been one of the better rush defenses in the league statistically, and then you're watching out there, you know the job that they can do. But to me, I do worry about that secondary. But with this schedule, I think you guys should be pretty solid and pretty set to at worst be a top two, top three team in the AFC.
Yeah, I agree. So, talking about the Jaguars, get into the Monday Night Football preview. Man, I don't know if you know about this, but the Jaguars have not had a Monday Night Football game in the last 12
And
years.
gonna say insane amount of time.
Bro, the last time we had a Monday Night Football game, I had to be in like 6th grade, which is crazy. So,
Why? Why is that?
Small market team. We haven't been good for a very long time. We don't have a quarter. We never had a quarterback that you can really lean on. We had MJD in the years past, but no one wants to see the Jaguars get on TV and embarrass themselves. You know what I'm saying?
I
Because anytime we
understand.
did get Thursday night football games or like even a preseason Monday night game, we get thrashed. So, it's a lot of things to tie into it as well. Supposedly our owner doesn't, because I think owners during like the coaches and owners meeting, they can kind of petition their teams to play for primetime games.
Hmm.
And supposedly our owner never did that. He just said, "I'm gonna let the NFL decide on that," and it's like that's what we always play at 1 o'clock. So there's a
Okay.
lot of backwards thinking, but going forward, I think we're gonna have a lot more with Trevor Lawrence and stuff like that, and Doug Peterson. But anyways, we faced the Bengals tonight. This game looked as if it was going to be a very, very interesting game coming into the season. Unfortunately, Joe Burrow goes down. This Bengals team is currently 5-6, and they are playing for their wild card lives right now. Right, Jake Browning stepped in last week against the Steelers. They unfortunately lost, but Jamar Chase had a big day. T. Higgins comes back tonight. Tyler Boyd comes back tonight as well, healthy, and Joe Mixon. They looked as if the healthiest on offense right now. Defensively, they did lose Cam Taylor-Britt, and they're also still shuffling some pieces on the D line after the Jaguars. 2-game winning streak right now. Had a nice performance offensively against the Texans last week. Trevor Lawrence is playing his good football right now, like we saw last year in the month of December. The offensive line is banged up, but they brought in Ezra Cleveland, who'll be starting tonight, so that's going to
Yep.
be big time right there. So how do you feel about the Jaguars in this game? I know you probably predicted them to win, but what's your overall feel going to this matchup?
To me, I'm looking at the Cincinnati Bengals, and it's not a team that I feel great about going up against Pittsburgh last week. When you allow them to break their streak of 59 games in a row of not having a 400-yard offensive game, the defense, which is supposed to be the safer of the two right now, especially without Joe Burrow, and the way that we respect Lou Anarumo and anticipate that he gets a head coaching gig in this offseason, for that defense to get gashed the way that they did. And I understand that it is a division game and a rivalry game, but regardless, you got to go out there and execute. And they didn't do that on any phase. Jake Browning didn't look good whatsoever. I think Jamar Chase bailed him out in a ton of situations where tip ball, Jamar Chase is just has an eye for the ball. He goes
Mm-hmm.
and he makes plays happen. To me, I don't feel confident in this Cincinnati team whatsoever. This is a game where we should look to see Trevor Lawrence continue his hot streak, keep going and trying to build this offense in a positive way to get ready for playoff football. Y'all should pretty easily win this game, and I'll be continuing my nasty agenda that your defense is not good if you
Yeah,
allow Jake Browning to have a good game. You should
yeah.
lock up. Jake Browning is
Mm-hmm.
not good. But if
Mm-hmm.
you allow him to play well, I'm sorry, sir. I'm gonna have
Yeah.
to get on a microphone and get nasty.
Yeah, that sounded crazy. But
Come on,
that's
come on. We're talking sports.
I know,
Jesus.
that sounded crazy. But that's hilarious. But yeah, I agree. If Jake Browning has a night against my defense, man, I'm gonna be really mad. But like I said, I try to be objective about my team as possible. I know how we get in these games. Sometimes we come out there and just embarrass ourselves, and we win by 4, and everybody's questioning us and stuff like that. But you know it's the first Monday Night Football game in 12 years, like I said. This team should be motivated. They're coming out in
For
the all
sure.
black uniforms, black end
Tough.
zones. This should be a big time night for this offense. ETN isn't the healthiest, but I expect Trevor Lawrence to really continue that groove offensively in the passing attack. Calvin Ridley's been finding this groove in the last few weeks. I expect this Jaguars team to win at least 28 to like 14, something like that.
You know what this is reminiscent of to me? Remember that Cincinnati year, the year that they went to the Super Bowl, where it started off the season where Joe Mixon was their best, most consistent offensive player. It got
Mm-hmm.
into a point in the season when they decided to push the ball down the field a little bit more vertically on the outside with the Jamar, with the T. Higgins. They found something out late in the year, and they started to be one of the better pass offenses in the league. Now look at Jacksonville. For a majority of the beginning of the year, you saw Travis Etienne be the heart and soul of this Jaguars offense. Now we're kind of seeing where you mentioned Etienne hasn't been the healthiest, but now we're starting to see this pass game become unlocked. Start to see Calvin Ridley be the guy who y'all anticipated coming into the season. Kirk has been Kirk. He's going to be one of the more consistent guys. Evan Ingram, who's now the most targeted. I think he's still
Yeah.
the most targeted player without a touchdown in the National
Yeah.
Football League.
Yeah.
But you gotta maybe a little bit of optimism on that side of the ball where, hey, we struggled early on, but It's not
Mhm.
about how you start, it's about how you finish. And now at the perfect time of the year, you guys are figuring it out in that regard.
Yeah, yeah, man. It's definitely the perfect time to figure it out, man. But yeah, that about do it, man. I definitely appreciate you for getting on the show today, man. This was
Oh
definitely
yeah.
fun. Please let the people know where they can find you at.
Well, first off, before anything else, I want to thank you. Appreciate you
Hmm.
having me onto the podcast, bro. Always love coming on people's shows and just chopping it up and getting to learn other people's perspective on the game I love. But of course, shout out to you. But if you guys want, find me at Pick a Side Podcast. My Twitter at Handrew5As. I tweet pretty interesting opinions on there. But again, it all begins with you,
Hmm.
bro. Appreciate your time and appreciate you having me on, man.
Absolutely. And one last thing before we get off here, man, can you please just, you know, drop some type of like, game or motivation you have for people out there that, that are in your shoes or, in my shoes right now. Cause I'm, trying to find the consistency and trying to get to y'all's level. What type of information can you provide just, to let people know like how this, how to grind and stuff like that when it comes to stuff like this.
Block out outside noise. Trust your mind, trust yourself, trust that the decisions that you make are the ones that are the right ones.
Hmm.
Constantly keep working. Don't cheat others of your greatness. My dad instilled that in me in a long time. I wear it on my neck. It's a great quote. Don't cheat others of your greatness. Keep driving to be the best possible version of yourself. That's what keeps me going. Trying to be the best me that I can possibly be. I'm not trying to be anybody else other than me. But as long as I still strive to be the best version of myself, that's all I can ask for. And I consider myself successful in that regard as of right now. But never get complacent. Always keep building. Always keep going.
Yeah, absolutely, man. I think that's what makes you an intricate piece in the podcast and what you guys got going out there, man. So
Appreciate
beautiful
that,
stuff,
bro. It means a
man.
lot.
Yes, absolutely, man. Until next time, man. That is a wrap.
Oh, yeah.